Listen to the complete season ad-free by subscribing to Curious Cast Discovery exclusively on Apple Podcasts.
We're in Utah, the present day. Taj and Priya Roland have just moved to a new house. They're pretty much unpacked now. They've just got the last few boxes in the basement to sort through. Boxes marked miscellaneous, things they suspect they can just throw out. Priya finds a bunch of photos and souvenirs which they haven't looked at in years. Treasures from their early days, cinema tickets, love letters, and some photocopies of Taj's adoption papers and correspondence with the orphanage. Taj has kind of made peace with his story now. He's found his way home and he's found his family. And he's accepted that there are some chapters he'll never be able to fill in fully, like who kidnapped him and who sold him to the orphanage. That doesn't seem to matter anymore. He's even ready to throw away some of that old paperwork which maps out his past. And that's when Priya's hand touches something hard at the bottom of the box. She pulls it out, puzzled. It's an old cassette tape, and on the faded label, someone's written, Taj Khyber Roland, Part 2. A second tape. Taj has never seen this tape before. He has no recollection of ever making it. And frankly, he doesn't want to hear it. He has no desire to go back to the painful past. He's focused on the future now. But what if this cassette holds the answers? What if embedded on the magnetic coating of this tape are the missing parts of his faded memory? The key to unlocking why all this happened to him, whose fault it was that he got ripped away from home. So he can't help himself. He does it. He presses play.
What's your name?
From Curious Cast and Blanchard House, this is Stop Rewind, The Lost Boy. I'm Emma Jane Kirby. Episode 9. All that I have is yours.
Taj, do you think that maybe your father sold you to those boys?
Yeah, I think so.
Why?
Because he don't want me.
It's the first thing Taj hears on the newly found tape, and it knocks him sideways.
I'm just so upset. I'm just like burning. I want to punch a hole in the wall.
Taj just can't accept it.
I'm telling you now, my father didn't sell me. There's just no possible way.
But on the tape, Chelamutu's voice continues to roll.
How do you know he did not want you?
Because I'm bad,
You were bad?
but I don't know, she don't like me.
It's extremely painful for Taj to hear this. Nearly 30 years after he found his family again and realized his lifelong craving to really belong. Taj knows his father was a drunk. He remembers throwing bottles at his dad to stop him beating his mother. But equally, he remembers riding on his shoulders, bouncing and laughing. Now Chelamutu seems to be saying that his father didn't love him at all, that he wanted him gone.
It's so disgusting. I'm so upset about it.
But the person Taj blames for what he's hearing is not his father. He blames Linda, his adoptive mother, for making him record the tape in the first place.
My mother, she had forced me, and I noticed the word I used, force, and I deliberately used that, forced me to speak into these audio cassette tapes, but I do remember I hated doing that.
Taj accuses Linda of putting words into his mouth and ideas into his head.
I just got angry listening to this tape. Priya at one point had to send me to the other room because I was starting to swear at this situation on this tape. Almost a forced interview with leading questions.
It's true that Linda does ask leading questions on the tape. Do you think that maybe your father sold you to those boys? Is undoubtedly a leading question, prompting Chelamuthu to give Linda the response he thinks she wants. But Linda wouldn't have had her tape recorder with her all the time, poised to hit record. So when Taj first voiced his suspicions about his father, Linda says he probably did it when they were in the car, on their way back from soccer practice, or at the supermarket, or when she was cooking dinner and trying to feed the baby at the same time. She would have only taken out the tape recorder once the little ones were in bed, once the laundry was done and the lunch boxes packed for the next day. And then she'd have had to remind Taj what they'd been talking about.
Oh, he told me several times that his father sold it.
And Linda remembers quite specific details.
He said, I know my father sold me for 35 rupees.
These are details which Taj refutes, that he thinks have somehow been lost in translation.
I have a feeling that my mom may have misunderstood.
But Linda's sure of her story. And what's more, she thinks Taj is too. She thinks it's not so much that he can't remember, it's more that he doesn't want to, that he just can't bring himself to, especially now that he's playing Happy Families back in India. Because why ruin a beautiful story?
Honestly, I think he knows for sure.
Except, of course, now Taj can hear this story not from Linda, but firsthand, from his own childish mouth.
Did your dad like the big brother?
Yeah.
Did he like the baby?
Yeah.
Do you think he wanted to sell them too?
I don't know. Maybe.
And as he listens to his own voice, Taj feels himself pulled back in time to when he was 7 years old at the E Road bus station.
I could close my eyes and you can immediately pick out you're at the E Road bus stand.
He remembers being elbowed and jostled by that shoving, sweaty crowd. But can he pick out his father among all those faces?
Yeah, as I close my eyes, just the shouting of the conductors and the smell of fruit stands and the heat on my body.
But while he can conjure up a general impression of the day he was kidnapped, he can't bring any specific details into sharp focus, like who was with him. He has a feeling there was a familiar face.
I have a sense that I saw this person multiple times.
But the picture in his mind's too blurry.
I'm not certain that I remember too much of that particular day. A lot of that is I've closed my memory out from what transpired, and I think it's just a little too tough and too surreal for me to remember it too well. To be honest, I really don't want to remember.
Taj's wife Priya isn't surprised he's blocked it out.
Who wants to remember that? It must have been horrifying.
And quite possibly, it's just too traumatic to remember. His brain is deliberately blocking things out to protect him.
I just can't see their face. I can't prove it. And I don't want to accuse somebody if I can't prove that.
I'm sure somewhere in his head he probably has an image of the person he was sitting next to. It's there.
I'm most grateful that I don't remember the details, because if a name or a face popped into my head, I think I'd be
I'd be chasing something that I shouldn't be chasing.
Taj is acutely aware that his long-term memory is faulty. There are big holes in what he can remember. But he can't ignore the recorded evidence. So he asks Priya to check the first tape again, the one he recorded in Tamil when he first arrived in Utah, the same one which horrified Priya when she visited Fred and Linda as Taj's new girlfriend and translated that tape for them.
So you're saying that he took you and he brought you. He captured you.
And on that tape, Chelamuthu does talk about a man having taken him. He never identifies that man as his father, but he does mention his dad.
And he says it so softly. He didn't like his father too much. He says that in the tape. He says, I don't want dad.
But why did Chelamuthu say he didn't want his dad? Of course, the easiest thing would be to ask his birth father directly. But sadly, he passed away long before Taj unearthed that second tape. So he can't tell us his side of the story. But what about his friends and family? You'll remember Papadi, the landlady who loved Chelamuthu, who always gave him sweets and let him herd her cows. Well, she once told him something quite curious. She was reminiscing about the pain his family went through when he went missing as a child. All of them, that is, except one.
அவங்க அப்பா அப்படி கண்டுக்க மாட்டாங்க அவங்க அம்மா அவங்க சித்தி எல்லாம் ரொம்ப.
But his father didn't seem too upset. He didn't really show as much concern. Not like his mother.
Taj's father became estranged from his family very soon after Chelamuthu went missing. And he only really reappeared when Taj came back, nearly 20 years later. And even Taj admits that the timing seems a little odd.
There is a little bit of doubt that's sown in my brain about that. Okay, why did my father leave? Why was that? And so was it guilt? It could be shame as well, if that occurred.
And the new tape also reminds Taj of other unpleasant aspects of his father's behaviour, about how his drinking made him steal his wife's wages.
My dad makes beer and stuff. My mom works hard to take care of our family, and my dad does no work and he steals money out of my mom's purse.
Could Taj's father have done worse to get money to support his alcohol addiction?
My father, I know he loved me, at least the small memories I do have. However, he was poor, he did drink, and there are decisions that you make when you're under the influence. You know, was there money exchange? I don't know. Is there a possibility? Yeah, there's a possibility.
It's a horrible scenario for Taj to face.
It's so unthinkable, the idea that immediately gets tossed out and just not even as an option. On the other hand, I've spent a great deal of time in India, and I've seen what poverty can do to a person. And I've seen people do things that are horrendous. But that being said, I choose not to believe that my father had anything to do with it. Yeah, I choose not to believe that.
And Papadi, the old landlady, agrees with Taj. She shakes her head fervently when asked if Taj's father could have been involved in his disappearance.
அப்படியெல்லாம் இல்லைம்மா எல்லாம் பாசமாக பிள்ளை பசங்க மேலே எல்லாம் பாசமாக இருப்பார் அந்த கெட்ட பழக்கம்.
That man loved his children, all his children. His one big problem was drinking. He loved alcohol, but he certainly loved his children.
Now, if anyone could justify holding a grudge against Taj's father, it would surely be Arai, Taj's mother. She suffered terribly because of his drinking. But she's also dismissive of the idea that her husband could have harmed Chelamuthu. She claims her husband's mind was shot with alcohol, He simply didn't have the mental capacity to plot something like this.
No, I told you, my husband never cared for anyone or anything, only alcohol. He couldn't have been involved. He didn't have it in him to leave a road, let alone to think up this plan.
Sometimes Taj fantasizes about another scenario. It's kind of wishful thinking. Maybe that familiar face at E Road bus station was his father. But rather than wanting to get rid of Chelamutu, perhaps he was trying to save him, hoping he'd be taken to an orphanage and adopted into a wealthier family who could feed and educate him.
If my father dreamt of a better life that he was incapable of providing, I could understand. I really could. I'm not saying my father did that.
If that was the case, then why did Chelamutu on the tape say his father thought he was bad and didn't like him?
I think Chelamutu, I don't think he's really blaming his dad. I don't think he's really saying, my dad sold me. I think he's thinking out loud that says, God, why am I in this situation? What happened to me? Why have you given up on me?
In his childish logic, his parents had burnt his feet for running away, and yet he ran away again. So he must have thought he was being punished.
And then you suddenly think about, maybe my dad didn't like me because I was bad. I know that my feet are burned, maybe. I don't think he's blaming, I think he's asking questions.
Taj believes that people who knew his dad, who completely reject the idea his father was involved in what happened to him. His adoptive mum, Linda, has always wanted to pursue the truth, but she knows that pushing Taj would hurt him and would make him even angrier with her. Maybe some chapters are best left unread.
I've said that to myself many times, that Linda, it's probably better you don't even know. Because if this was his father, it's not good to know. It's better to let Taj think it was not his father. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
But the tape does matter, because when Taj listened to it, he heard other secrets, other evidence he can't ignore. Evidence about the orphanage owner, Paul Thurvados, the man Taj always remembers as being so kind to him. But was he? When Chelamutu arrived at Lincoln Home for Homeless Children back in 1979, it was Paul Thurvados, the orphanage owner, who cared for him. Chelamutu trusted Paul, so he told him that he wasn't an orphan, that he had parents and that he'd been kidnapped. And Taj has always defended Paul for not being able to reunite him with his family.
What's he supposed to do? How can he help this child return?
After all, Chelamutu was only 7. He couldn't give any useful information to Paul.
I don't know the name of the city, and so even if the orphanage wanted to help, they were lost.
But from what Chelamutu says on the second tape, Paul wasn't really motivated to help him go home at all. Paul was more focused on keeping Chelamutu exactly where he was, by telling him to forget the past.
I said, I have a sister and brother and mom and dad. And he said, you don't have a mom and dad. I popped up to that said, you don't have a mom and dad. You can't go home. You have to stay on orphanage. She said, that's all.
On the tape, Linda picks him up on this, and Chelamutu is very clear why he thinks Paul wouldn't help him go home.
Weren't you mad at Mr. Thurvados? Why didn't he try to find your mother or father?
Yeah, but he wants me to stay there, but he wants money for me to get money from you.
Oh, what you're saying is he wanted you to stay there so that he could sell you.
Yeah.
Because, of course, Chelamutu had value on the adoption market. Taj hasn't listened to this new tape before, not since he made it over 45 years ago, and emotionally he's struggling to make sense of it.
I felt like he was kind. He took care of me and spoke to me, but did he have ulterior motives? I don't know. I mean, as an adult and looking back on it, everybody has ulterior motives. I don't care who you are. You're exchanging something for something.
When Taj first found his way back to the orphanage in 1997, he was horrified when local people told him that Paul had been arrested and the orphanage had shut down.
I heard there were some potentially negative ways that how children arrived at the orphanage, that there was some profiteering in the process of adoption. And none of this I know personally.
Paul had died the year before, so Taj couldn't confront him. But as a child, the tape suggests that Chelamutu knew that Paul paid people to bring him children, and that inadvertently or deliberately, Paul had created a supply chain.
While you were there at the orphanage, did you ever see Mr. Thurvadas buy any other children from boys?
Mm-hmm. Lots.
And what's more, Chelamutu knew exactly what type of child Paul was looking for, which sort of children would sell.
His son kid was, he doesn't want it because they don't take it.
They won't take the big boys, huh?
Mm-hmm. They take the little ones.
Are you kind of a big boy?
I'm kind of little.
You really don't know how old you are.
No, that Paul does are 3.
Of course, Linda and Fred committed to adopting Chelamutu because Paul had promised them he was only 3. And in the middle of that long, drawn-out adoption process, we know that Chelamutu ran away from the orphanage. And thanks to the second tape, we now know what happened when he did.
I stopped because I'm tired and they got me.
What do you mean they got you? Who came after you?
Paul told us on the car.
He picked you up in the car?
Yeah.
Were you running on the road?
Yeah. Just so, why you ran away? And I said, I don't know Mom and Dad. He said, you don't have Mom and Dad.
Was Mr. Thurvadas mad at you because you ran away?
Yeah.
What did he do?
He put me in the room.
And did he lock the door again?
Mm-hmm. He hits sometimes.
Taj can only recall being smacked once at the orphanage. He suspects that in the recording, he was just second-guessing what Linda wanted him to say. Because while he distinctly remembers feeling homesick at Lincoln Home, he doesn't remember any mistreatment.
Majority is kindness, and I don't recall it being beat and stuffed in a room. I didn't remember any of that.
Of course, Taj knows that Paul made money from each child he managed to send overseas for adoption. The orphanage was Paul's main enterprise, the means to feed his own family.
He may have made money, but I don't believe Paul's real motivation was making money. I think his real motivation was to really provide a better life for these orphan children. I really believe that.
But what about how those children arrived at the orphanage? If Chelamutu often saw Paul paying people who dropped them off, word would have got around that there was easy money to be made. Did Paul carefully check the provenance of each child he took in? Or was he simply too naive, the kind of man who only wanted to see the good in people? Maybe that's why he just accepted whatever backstory people told him when they delivered a child to his orphanage. After all, he took Chelamutu from those older boys without ever checking if their story was true.
Even if there was a small percentage that may have been negative, I don't know. My intuition is it didn't happen frequently.
Remember, Taj's adoption was completely independent, direct between the family and Lincoln Home for Homeless Children. Ironically, if the Rowlands had gone through the local LDS-approved adoption agency, they'd have discovered that agency no longer worked with Paul because of concerns about irregularities in his practices. And what Linda says on the tape would suggest that some of Paul's practices were decidedly questionable. And the law thought so too.
Actually, for your information, we received a phone call from some of our friends who had heard from the State Department that Paul had been sent to prison for kidnapping children. And we have no idea if this is true or not.
Was Paul Thurvados running an orphanage? Or a child trafficking business? It's extremely hard to get official information on what happened to Paul Thurvados. In 1970s and 1980s rural India, police papers and court documents weren't always systematically filed, which means the archives are patchy. But in July 1980, 2 Indian newspapers carried articles about Paul, and through them we get a good picture of what was really going on at Lincoln Home for the Homeless. The first newspaper article is headlined, "Man Held for Trade in Children." It says that Paul Thurvados had been arrested for the alleged wrongful confinement of a 14-year-old boy who'd run away from home. The boy had escaped the orphanage and fled to the police station, claiming he'd been locked in a room at the orphanage for 4 days. His complaint appears to have prompted police to raid Lincoln Home for the Homeless in search of another missing child, this time a 4-year-old boy. The second article from the Hindu newspaper reports the missing small boy had been found, wandering near the orphanage. But a police investigation revealed that a woman, whom the paper described as Paul's tout or agent, had lured the child to the orphanage and had then sold him to Paul Thurvados for 30 rupees.
A lot of questionable practices that I hear about Paul. I just hope he was a good man. I think he was. Overall, there's a couple of bad situations he got stuck in, and then he decided to turn a blind eye because he was stuck in a business.
The newspaper reports reveal that Paul was then rearrested for abetting kidnapping, and a magistrate ordered him and the woman accused of being his agent to be remanded in custody.
I feel incredibly sad if in reality that was true. Sad not only for myself, but other children that were robbed of their childhood and potentially their life with their real families.
We don't know if Paul was ever formally charged, let alone tried or convicted for abetting kidnapping. One of the newspaper articles notes that as well as having worked in the cement factory, he was also a dismissed police official. He probably still had some friends in high places, people who could help him get out of a tight spot.
And he was probably doing many things illegal. He was bribing officials, paying people off.
When Linda challenged Paul about falsifying Chelamutu's birth certificate, he told her it was for all the right reasons, that he'd do whatever it took to get a suffering child out of India. And Taj believes that. He thinks Paul might have been misguided, but his motives were good. But when Linda discovered Chelamutu was not an orphan, Paul refused to engage at all. Taj thinks Paul was just backed into a corner.
It's done. The deal's done. Let me walk away, wash my hands of it, and he tried to move on to the next thing. And it's just an unfortunate number of events.
Not long after Paul was investigated by the police, it seems he was also questioned by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And according to some of his acquaintances, Paul Thurvados, India's first Mormon convert, was excommunicated.
Oh, what a twisted world we live in. I'm going to tell you, one of my deepest wishes was I would have loved to have chatted with Paul.
Perhaps one man did chat with Paul. The man who promised Linda in a letter all those years ago that he'd talk to Paul and raise her concerns. And that's Priya's father, who at one time counted Paul among his good friends. Perhaps he met Paul and learnt something he disapproved of. Or maybe Paul said nothing at all. We don't really know if they ever did meet up again. But he certainly never sent Linda a follow-up letter. And Taj's father-in-law has never talked to Taj about Paul. He's never spoken about Paul's orphanage. He confirmed to Priya that he remembered writing a letter to Linda, then made it clear there'd be no further discussion on the subject.
It was just kind of shut away, and we didn't really talk about it. It was more of a hush-hush. My dad's a good person. He's, I just think he just doesn't want to stir the past back up and talk about it. Maybe he just doesn't want to talk about it anymore. I really don't know. He's a good guy. I love him.
I think Priya's father was like, you know what? I don't want to know, and I'll just stay away, so I don't want to get involved.
Today, Taj is no longer that hot-headed young man, suspicious of everyone, ready to march up to Priya's father, demanding answers. Taj understands his father-in-law better now. He realises he was just a bystander. This wasn't his mess to get mixed up in.
I believe that my father-in-law was a little bit put in a precarious situation because I'm certain he heard about, potentially some unscrupulous activities that occurred in the adoption processes, be it if he heard about it with Paul Thurvdes or other adoption companies.
Priya asked her dad if he'd like to take part in this podcast, but he declined. And that doesn't surprise Taj.
He never really talks to me ever directly because I think he's a little bit afraid, personally, that I will dive into deeper and start asking questions that he's not comfortable in answering.
Taj thinks that's why his father-in-law refused to help him at the wedding when Taj decided to look for the orphanage and his family. He just didn't want to get involved. Taj reckons that decision has stayed with him.
He's never really embraced me as a real son-in-law. And I think, especially the first few years, I think he just, every time he saw me, it reminded him of a mistake that he had made of not doing something that he should have or could have. I don't think we're friends, actually.
That's sad.
I mean, you can see the interactions. I mean,
You try.
Oh, I've tried,
I've seen you try. Yeah. You're probably right.
Yeah.
But perhaps Taj's relationship with his father-in-law is stronger than he thinks. When Taj's birth father died a few years ago, he and Priya were overseas and they couldn't get back to India in time for the funeral. Taj felt bad not being there. And that's when Priya's father did something completely unexpected, without being asked and without even telling Taj. Having never before shown any interest in meeting Taj's birth family, Priya's father went to Erode to represent him at the funeral.
I think it was to ease a sense of guilt that he had. I think he did it to ease his conscience a little bit, in my opinion.
But I think it was a way for him to kind of make up for that time when he couldn't be there for Taj.
Before Taj puts his cassette tapes back in the souvenir box in his basement, there's one final thing on the tapes we need to hear. Something Chelamuthu recorded and repeated. Something specific he clearly wanted to remember. But as his Tamil language faded and as the details of his childhood in India dulled, a new American life took over, writing over his old memories. So that one important thing he wanted to remember, it just slipped away from him. It's perhaps the most bitter twist in Chelamuthu's story.
Tell us about your house in India. Do you know the name of the city where you lived?
Erode.
Say that again.
Erode.
Say the name of the city one more time.
Erode.
Erode, or Erode. So Chelamuthu did know where he lived, and he told everyone. He wasn't just begging for someone to help him go home on those tapes. He was explaining to them where they needed to take him. He even whispered it onto that very first tape he made, newly arrived in Utah and only able to speak Tamil.
Erode.
So Linda heard the name of Chelamuthu's hometown, but didn't understand it. And in the shock of translating that first cassette, even Priya missed it. And that means that when he arrived at the orphanage, he would definitely have told Paul. So all these years, Taj has justified Paul's inaction by saying he had no idea where Chelamutu came from, that he had no idea how to help him. The tape reveals otherwise.
Paul would have known where I came from. Could Paul have tried or attempted to find me, my family? I'm certain he probably could have.
Paul knew the name of Chelamutu's hometown, and Paul chose not to act on it. He didn't try to take him home. Taj has had those tapes for more than 45 years, and during that whole time, he's never listened, not even once, to any of the recordings all the way through. Until now, when he listened to them with me.
It was almost unbelievable for you that I had not listened to these tapes, that I don't read those documents. I saw the look in your face. It was unbelievable that I hadn't jumped in and learned every word in those things. I hate it. It brings me sadness. It brings me ugly memories, like a haunting, and there's so much pain attached to that.
That's why Linda questioning him on tape made him feel so angry, and why the tapes make Linda feel so guilty.
If I could have found his mother, I'm sure we would have sent him back. I'm sure we would have, because I couldn't stand what happened to him.
Linda's haunted by thoughts of Taj's birth mother. For all those years, Arai ached for her lost son while she was enjoying mothering him. And when Taj found his family, Linda's guilt magnified.
It was so unfair to her. That's what I think. She got robbed. She got kidnapped.
Unbeknown to Taj, Linda was constantly pressing her husband Fred to book a trip to India. But Fred was a reluctant traveller, nervous about getting sick in a developing country. So the years went by and Linda felt more and more wretched, and Taj felt more and more resentful about what he saw as his parents' disinterest. Until in early 2015, Linda told Fred she had to go. She had to go and face the woman she feared most in the world. She had to look Arai, Taj's birth mother, in the eye and tell her that she was sorry.
That to me was in my heart. The most important thing we were going to do was to see her. And so that was just a lifetime, all these years wondering if she'd hate me, if she would not like me, she'd be upset, you know.
So one morning, Linda telephones Taj, and with Fred at her side for strength, she takes a big, deep breath and says,
"We want to meet your mother."
On the other end of the line, a long silence. After all this time, Taj suddenly feels this is a very bad idea.
I didn't want him to go. India is my happiness. India is my joy. America is unhappiness. It's hell. And now my two worlds are going to collide. I didn't want them to come.
But the plane tickets are booked. Taj's two mothers are about to come face to face. You've been listening to Stop Rewind, The Lost Boy, a Blanchard House production for Curious Cast. It's hosted, written and produced by me, Emma Jane Kirby, with additional production by Himat Shalagram. Stop Rewind, The Lost Boy is inspired by the book The Orphan Keeper by Cameron Wright. We'd like to make it clear that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints has never promoted or facilitated the adoption of children from Paul Thurvedos's orphanage, Lincoln Home for Homeless Children. The words of Taj's mother Arai are voiced by Soham Kapila, and Taj's brother Ishwaran is voiced by Tarash Maharotra, with translations from the original Tamil by Nadiani S. On the ground interpreting by Smita TK. Additional research by Catherine Gillon. Original music by Toby Matamong, Louis Nankmanel and Daniel Lloyd Evans. Sound design and mix engineering by Volkan Kiseltuk, Daniel Lloyd Evans, Toby Matamong and Louis Nankmanel. Post-production supervised by Daniel Lloyd Evans. The creative director of Blanchard House is Rosie Pye. The head of content at Blanchard House is Lawrence Grizel. For Blanchard House, the executive producers are Amika Shortino-Nolan and Lawrence Grizel. For Curious Cast, the executive producers are Dida Velasquez and Chris Duncombe.